is insane. How do you make that catch?
Oh, my goodness.
Well, what we thought was going to start as an ordinary, just mundane, no sports quarantine life of episode of Ventline took a very interesting turn this morning, not in Cleveland, not in Minnesota, but in New York, where Mark Malusis, a co-host on WFAN, for which Odell Beckham Jr. used to play, of course, for the Giants, Malusis out of New York reported this morning that there are trade talks, there are discussions going on that would send a couple draft picks from the Vikings to the Cleveland Browns for Odell Beckham. In fact, here is Mark Malusis' entire analysis, commentary, and report on what is going on when it comes to the purple and Odell Beckham Jr.
So, last night, I get a text from, a good, well-placed source, right? And
someone in the know.
Correct. Who basically said, that don't be surprised if you see Odell Beckham Jr. get traded to the Minnesota Vikings for a 2 and 5 next year. So the Odell, that's what, he was hearing. He said, don't be surprised if that deal does not go, it does not happen. That it's, it's not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. I want to come on the airwaves and tell you that. But, the Cleveland Browns are having conversations with the Minnesota Vikings, and there have been talks about Odell getting dealt to Minnesota, and the cost back in return as of right now, or as of within the last, 48 hours, has been a 2 and a 5 that would go back to Cleveland, and Odell Beckham Jr. then would be on his third team, which would be the Minnesota Vikings. Not a done deal by any stretch, but as we get inch closer and closer to next Thursday night.
It's Zolgad, it's Declan Goff, and that again, Mark Malusis, co-host WFAN's midday show, talking about a potential Odell Beckham trade to the Vikings, which would be obviously completed before the draft next Thursday. All right, so the immediate response, before we bring my buddy Chip Scoggins into the conversation, the immediate response that tweet and report by Malusis got, Declan Goff, was from the masses in Minnesota saying, buzz off, who is this guy? No way this trade is being made. All right? I'm going to tell you why we should take this seriously. One is my first point that I said before I played the soundbite that we just heard from WFAN. Malusis is either connected to Giant sources, OBJ sources, because he played for the Giants, or both. All right? So that's number one. This isn't a report out of San Diego, California about Odell Beckham Jr. This is a report from a place where Odell Beckham Jr. spent the first portion of his career. The other thing is obvious. The Vikings have a need here. They've got tons of draft needs, but with the trade of Stephon Diggs to Buffalo, they have a definite need for a number 2 receiver behind Adam Thielen. Because right now, who is that guy? BC Johnson? Trading draft picks to Cleveland for OBJ, no matter what you think of him, gives you a number 2, well, heck, not number 2, a number 1 receiver, bumps Thielen to 2. Number 3, are you forgetting that Kevin Stefanski, the Vikings offensive coordinator and longtime assistant, is now the head coach in Cleveland and has a ton of personnel say? All right. So if you've heard all of those things and you're still saying, Judd, you're full of it, it's not going to happen, Beckham's not coming here, shut up, I'm tired of this. Here's the clincher, folks.
Oh, here we go.
Here's the clincher.
Here we go.
If you are a football fan and you scroll Twitter, and you were scrolling Twitter last night, you saw a report from a guy by the name of Jay Glazer, who used to break a ton of news and now breaks some, not a ton. Jay Glazer went on Jason Smith's show on Fox Sports Radio last night and said, and I quote, on tomorrow's Fox Football Now, I have a scoop, legit big breaking news on the show tomorrow. It's not news to make fun of. It's good news. And you're saying, okay, but again, Glazer doesn't break a ton of news now, so how does that tie in? A year ago during the offseason, it was Glazer who had solidly, and I use this in air quotes because he knew what he was talking about, he predicted that Beckham would be traded from the Giants, and everybody said he's not being traded. It was Glazer. It was Glazer who reported in December that Beckham had been going up to opposing coaches before games while playing for the Browns and telling them, come get me, come get me. Now, how this would work, I have no clue. Because the last time I checked, Run for Zim is still in charge of the Vikings. But ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, Mark Malusis knows exactly what he's talking about, and I can almost 1,000% guarantee you that tonight Jay Glazer is going to report the very same thing, which is the Browns are in talks with somebody, probably the Vikings, about trading Odell Beckham Jr. The show is Ventline. We're in the TCL broadcast studios. Let's bring another phone conversation before we get to our calls as well. My buddy Chip Scoggins. So, Chip, we woke up this morning thinking, man, quarantined, it's boring. You know what I've got to say, Chip Scoggins? God bless the Minnesota Vikings.
Judd, I miss covering a beat with you.
I love this stuff. I appreciate that.
I miss being on the beat with you. I'm not buying it. And not to say that this media member is just throwing things out, but a couple things. One, I don't know how it would work money-wise. I think I got to assume OBJ has a huge contract and the Vikings have very little money, so I'm not sure how it would even match up. I don't think you could afford him. The other thing is you traded a guy who was being a problem, and so you're going to bring on a guy who's had a lot more baggage,
and
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, but it does, given the fact that the Vikings, how many previous receivers, Chip, have the Vikings thought that they could fix? Percy Harvin, they brought in Moss. Those are Spielman things.
Yeah,
I think it may. I'm not saying it makes perfect sense. I'm saying that I think there's a legitimate angle to the fact that there at least have been serious discussions, and this is a very Vikings-like move to me.
I think it comes down to finances too, Judd. I just don't know how you would afford it. I mean, you'd have to get rid of somebody, right? I assume you'd have to Anthony Harris. You'd have to move, and even then, would it make sense financially to have two high-priced wide receivers and, oh, by the way, you're going to do something with Dalvin Cook, and the coach wants to run the ball. So it just doesn't add up to me at all.
Let's see.
I understand that there's a need. Obviously, there's a huge need, and Zim and Spillman are on a win now because they don't have job security with their contracts. But other than that, I just don't see this adding up.
It's never boring though, Chip. That's the key thing.
Never boring.
These guys are never boring, and this does strike me. Now, I'm with you on this. I don't know how, if you got him, not just financially, I don't know how it works on the field because Mike likes to run. Stephon didn't like that, and OBJ is more of a pain in the butt than Stephon Diggs. And so does he get here and just, fit in with Kirk and be fine? So there are a lot of questions. And I'm not saying that the trade's going to get done. What I'm saying is I'm not dismissing the fact that the Browns are shopping him and the Vikings have made a phone call.
No, I mean, I've learned to never dismiss anything. Heck, we covered Brett Favre in purple. So
exactly.
I never dismiss anything. But could you imagine them, the first conversation with him, talking about how much he loves to run the ball?
I know.
I'd love to be the fly on the wall.
You know what?
Conversation.
You know what, Chipper? I guess
what?
I got to the point receiver-wise where I won't dismiss a thing since the day that Rick went to Brad in 2010 and said, I can get Moss. Can you handle Randy? And Brad said, absolutely, I can. After that, because the ability of football people to believe that they can fix problem children, I used to think, no, they're going to wise up and they're not going to get that guy. But the ability of football people to think that they can fix problem children who have a lot of talent, that's the key word here.
Yeah.
Baggage and talent.
Sorry about that. I'm not at my computer. Maybe you can look it up what his salary cap hit is. I got to imagine it.
His salary cap hit in 2020 is a very substantial, $14.3 million. It goes up to 15. You would have to restructure, and look, this would not be my first choice. This would not be my first choice. My first choice would be a veteran left tackle who can come in here and play, let's say 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's my first choice. It's just that with Rick does things sometimes that I used to say, really? And now I say, yeah, that sort of fits with what Rick tries to do. This is not easy, and I'm certainly not saying it gets done. But I'm also not I don't think that this guy, Mark Malusis from WFAN, is making it up.
No, I'm sure he talked to somebody from their camp because, like you said, they have his history from there, New York. But I agree that we've seen Spielman gamble at different times in the past, but I just don't know that they have the financial, the salary cap wiggle room to make those kind of gambles now. I mean, I think you're going to be relying a lot on this draft class and the young guys that were on the roster last year that are on their first, they're on their rookie contracts. I think those guys are going to have to play some pivotal roles because I just don't think they have the money to pull these kind of things off.
Right now, it looks like you're right. I saw that this morning, and my first thought was really, and then the more I thought about it and connected the pieces, I do think that Glazer's report coming out tonight, if it's not Beckham being shopped to the Vikings, it's definitely Beckham being shopped because Glazer sort of become the clearinghouse for OBJ news. And the fact that he teased on Fox Sports Radio last night that he had a big breaking story, but then didn't give it. And then the gun got jumped this morning by a guy in New York, all sort of fits together as it almost certainly involves this player. Well,
and the fact that this is Stefanski angle. I mean, that's a logical one for people to connect those dots that, if he's going to call who he knows, right, if they're shopping him.
Exactly.
And I don't doubt that they're shopping him, but I'm sure there are just other teams that have more financial wiggle room, salary cap wiggle room to make it happen.
Set to take some calls, Chip Scoggins?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's start with our buddy Dave in South Carolina. Hey, Dave, you're on Ventline. What's up? Your thoughts?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. How are y'all?
Good.
Good, thank you.
Good. My thoughts are that you've been asking Judd, just like I have, about where the direction is with this franchise and where we're going. And I think that would answer a lot of questions. I think if this is for 2 picks next year, I about swallowed my Adam's apple and choked on my coffee when I saw that. If it was a 2nd and 5th round this year, I would do it because you still got 2 first-round picks. You still got 2 third-round picks. And you can utilize all of those in addition to the 12 picks in total before we even make this trade. So I feel like it's very legitimate. I feel like it gives you a deep threat to run a lot of those same routes and to be able to run the offense like you need to run it and like they want to run it. And I think you're right. Stefanski realizes he's got the same situation he would have with Diggs, where he's got a receiver who's not going to be happy. And the only reason they can get this done is because of his track record, right? And a lot of teams may not do that. Plus, another thing I want to throw out there, they're not going to trade this guy to somebody in the AFC.
Right.
Especially with all the hubbub of the Browns, their organization, where they're going, right? I lived there for years. They're not going to do that. So it makes sense to trade him to somebody outside. And I'll be honest with you guys, I think it would be fantastic. And I think it would be something that if I'm the Vikings, I somehow find a way to make it happen. And then I think you definitely got to send Anthony Harris as well. And that $11 million comes off the books, I think, Chips. I think that's how it initially gets done. And I would never discount, I know you guys would not either, the ability for Rob Brzezinski to get something done and to get some kind of extension workout and push this money out for another 2 or 3 years while Kirk is still there.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. Chip?
Yeah, Judd, I was stunned when he said next year's picks. I wonder if he misspoke on that.
Somebody tweeted me and said because I tweeted that and said it surprises me that it's 2 2021 picks, and someone tweeted back with a good point. He tweeted, I think he's saying a 5th round pick in 2021, but a 2nd round pick in this draft. That makes more sense.
Well, that would make more sense, yeah, because I can't imagine you'd trade a player of that stature for picks next year. I mean, you would want them this year. So that would make more sense if it was both of them for next year. That would make a lot less sense to me. But yeah, it could be just he misspoke when he was saying that on air.
Let's go to the next caller. Hey, Ben, what's up? Your thoughts on Odell Beckham Jr. and this rumor?
So I know that it may not be true, it may be true, but if I'm the Vikings, a lot of the moves you've signaled have saying that you're trying to win in 2020.
Yep.
And if OBJ is healthy and his head is on straight, OBJ can only help Kirk Cousins, because whether Mike Zimmer understands this or not, when Kirk Cousins plays well, you win. When he doesn't play well, you lose. And that's really the bottom line of it. So if I'm the Vikings, I would make this trade. You have assets. It's not like you don't have anything to trade for him. You have assets to trade for him. I would go ahead and do it. Why not? If you're trying to win in 2020. And
Right.
it's not like Zimmer has dealt with crazy people in the past on his team. Let's see, Adam Pac-Man Jones.
Yeah, he's dealt well with some loose cannon type of personalities. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, Chip. It makes it. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Judd, that's the one thing that we've kind of the overriding topic or point to remember throughout this whole off season. That's been a little hard to figure out the moves is that job security for Zim and Spielman. Unless the Wilfs are going to come out later and say, hey, we've given these guys contract extensions. As far as we know, unless something's been done privately, they're still operating on as lamed up coach and GM. And so, there's tremendous pressure to win this year. And maybe the organization comes out later, once we gets back to a little bit more normalcy and say, hey, we've given these guys extensions. But as it stands right now, we don't know that. And so, this is not a, hey, let's win 3 years from now type thing. I mean, they need to win this year.
Exactly
and
right.
That's where some of these moves, trading Diggs made it seem a little contradictory, but that's where a rumor like this has some merit.
651-646-8255 if you'd like to join the conversation. The report out of New York today from a host at WFAN was that Odell Beckham Jr. has been linked in trade talks to the Vikings. Vikings sending a couple draft picks to Cleveland. Certainly not done yet. It's all in the speculation stage at this point, but the report is out there that those talks have taken place. Let's go next to Kyle. Hey, Kyle.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. This is a godsend right now. This is what we needed to be entertained. This is great.
Amen, Kyle. Amen, brother.
Fully aware this trade may not happen, but for my points I'm going to make, we're just going to pretend that it does as reported, all right? So if it goes down as reported, the Vikings are sending Stephon Diggs, a second-round pick, a seventh-round pick, receiving OBJ, a first, a sixth, a 2021 fourth. That's good in itself, right? So that's amazing if you just look at that in a vacuum. My second point is I think this could signal a shift in philosophy because undoubtedly Denver does not want to do this, but it could be Kubiak and Spielman saying, hey, we've done it your way for years and years. It's not really working. We got to win this year to save our jobs. Kubiak's always had a big play receiver, whether it was Demaryius Thomas in his prime here with Peyton Manning or Andre Johnson in Houston. Thielen's great, but I think this could be Kubiak kind of pushing back against Denver's run-only philosophy. And the last thing, if this saves us from overpaying Dalvin Cook, it's worth it just for that.
Thank you, Kyle.